usually if a character death happens, it's because we're probably on the third or fourth poor decision that the party has made together. It's usually telegraphed. It's usually something people can sort of deconstruct and go, oh, because the reality is in 5e, it is really hard to take out a character. It's really hard to, it's even more impossible to like do a total party wipe. Yeah, you said, how do you balance between being a nice DM that creates a fun experience versus being strict and clear about consequences? Very new to D&D, but was a DM for a one-shot with all my friends. You struggle between being nice and being tough to create tension and stakes and make the threats feel real. So that's a really good question, first of all. And I think that it's always about balance. One thing that I think helps is to see yourself not as the, well, every DM has a different approach. Mine is not necessarily to see my role as, turning the screws to the players, being the pressure cooker, like making sure that it's all. I don't really see myself that way. I sort of see myself as kind of the judge or the arbiter of this world, and I really want it to feel real, right? That doesn't mean that it is real, because if it is real, then, okay, you guys travel north, and for the next 40 days, nothing happens because it takes a really long time to travel to places, and not everything is interesting. That'd be truly real. I'm not interested in that. But I want it to be sort of verisimilitudinous, right? Like, I want there to be that feeling when you're playing that this feels like it's a real fantasy world. This feels like there are characters here, and there's an impact, and there's weight to all of this. And so when making judgment calls and trying to maintain that balance, a lot of times I'll call that out to players, right? When it's like, well, this is sort of the call here, and I'll explain that that's why. It's like, well, that's because, if that wasn't the case, then it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel real, right? That is a neat idea, but in other cases, right, sometimes, like, if a player wants to do, this is a really common request, if a player has a bow and arrow, they might want to do a called shot. Like, I want to shoot the weapon out of the hands of this enemy. And that's not technically something that exists within the rules as written, but I could be convinced to go with that. That is pretty cool. That could be very fun. I would just ask the players in that situation, hey, if we do this, are you okay if the enemies can do it too? Because if you can do it, then they can do it. And then that lets them say, actually, let's just not introduce that idea. It's not worth it, right? Because they don't want to face that going forward. I think if you approach it, though, as kind of like I said, just trying to create a game that feels right for everybody. How do you handle character deaths? Do you warn your players before doing a very risky move? It depends. Early on, I'm going to be a lot more generous with calling stuff out, especially if somebody's a new player. There is a point in time, I never know when this is, but there's a point in time where it's like, I'm going to stop asking questions that clarifies how careful people are being with their magic use, for instance. But if you're running 5e, Sarah's right. If you're running 5e, the best thing for DMs is that it's rarely like our fault. Like, usually if a character death happens, it's because we're probably on the third or fourth poor decision that the party has made together. It's usually telegraphed. It's usually something people can sort of deconstruct and go, oh, because the reality is in 5e, it is really hard to take out a character. It's really hard to, it's even more impossible to like do a total party wipe. But yeah, if it's early on and somebody's like playing a magic user or something like that for the first time, like I might call out to them, hey, just so you know, like you may not realize this, but certainly your character knows that, for instance, they might need to be more careful when they're using this spell because it might have blowback on their friends or something like that. And I think that's totally, that to me, that's just being sporting, right? Jesse says, speak for myself. Like, to some extent, you can fall back on that, right? Where the reason for providing information is if you think that, well, your character certainly knows this, even if you don't realize it. Again, trying to strike that truthiness that we want everything to feel like. Well, if you're playing this magic student and you don't know this very basic thing about this cantrip that you've probably practiced for hundreds of days straight to be able to cast it, here in an adventure, like, you're probably going to call that out to them, like, hey, just, it doesn't quite work that way. This is how your character knows that it works, and so you know it too. That type of thing. That's usually fair.